Clyde and Co. Lead counsel is Tom Stewart Coates. And the third defendant is represented by Bird and Bird. Lead counsel is Stephen Thompson QC.
And Mr. Thompson will be on the line.
Yes, I confirm they're both on the line.
Thank you. Now, is there a form of words you wish to recite before we begin, or do we just begin straight away?
Yes, just a short statement, if that's okay.
Yes, certainly.
This pre-trial review is in the matter CFI-054-2019 before Justice Sir Richard Field and is being held by way of teleconference. Any orders or directions made after or during the course of this hearing will be issued by the registry in Dubai on Justice Sir Richard Field's instructions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, Mr. Stewart Coates. Good morning, Mr. Thompson.
Good morning, my lord.
Shall we start with the length of the trial?
Good morning, my lord. Yes, I just wondered, firstly, whether I could check in what format your lordship has the PTR bundle, because I understand it might be online via the case line system or in one of two different PDFs with slightly different numberings.
Well, I've been sent the necessary documents, which I have printed off. So, for instance, I have a skeleton argument from the third defendant on the PTR. I've got the checklists. I've got estimated time tables for the trial, and I've got a witness statement for Mr. Pitts. Should I have something else?
No, I'm grateful, my lord. Then perhaps I'll just refer to documents by name rather than to a page reference in the bundles.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, now, so far as the length of the trial is concerned, I think it's the third defendant who says 7 days, and the claimant says 5 days at the moment. And both of those estimates are on the basis of an in-person hearing, because one can see from the hours that are the timetables are predicated on the normal sitting hours from about 10 o'clock through till 4:30 or so. Now, whether the trial is going to be in person or remote is still up in the air. For it to be in person, whoever is going to be the judge is going to have to be in Dubai. And so far as the witnesses are concerned, the evidence can be given by a video link, or if travel permits, can be given by witnesses who are able to attend the trial. My experience from doing remote hearings into Dubai is that they generally start at 8 a.m. And which is 12 noon in Dubai, and they can go on for about 4.5 hours with a break. Now, I think we could start at 7 a.m. and take a slightly longer break. And my view is, but I'll hear from both of you, my view is that if the trial is remote, we ought to allow for 9 to 10 days. But if it's in person, I think that this is a 6-day trial. Mr. Stewart Coates, how do you react to that proposal?
Thank you, my lord. I should say that our assumption and indeed our request would be for the hearing to proceed remotely for a few reasons. The first being that, as I understand it from the registry this morning, that's currently how all hearings are being scheduled. Secondly, there's no indication of when that might change, what measures the respective emirates might put in place. I mean, it does seem to be a jurisdiction in the UAE that has relatively stringent public health measures when it comes to COVID, as is demonstrated by Mr. Al-Jabari's own evidence in support of his extension application. We also say that the prevailing medical evidence now seems to be that one of the higher risk situations seems to be prolonged periods inside without masks, and clearly cross-examination of witnesses with judge and counsel in attendance falls squarely within that category. And perhaps most importantly, from our perspective, our witness, expert and counsel availability has been determined in many, if not most cases, on the basis of remote attendance. We would also likely refer your lordship to Mr. Justice Legate's oft-quoted comments in the Guestman and Credit Suisse case about the reliability of witness testimony based on memory and the preference perhaps that judges might have for basing factual findings, even in cases such as this, on inferences drawn from documentary evidence. So to sum up, we would request a remote hearing. Where that leaves us in terms of length of trial, we have set out some dates of availability. There are 2 periods in which there is availability across a 2-week period, but I do understand from those instructing me that it may be difficult to get mutual availability for a full 9 to 10 days. And I don't know whether you've seen, my lord, from my skeleton argument that on the basis of Mr. Thompson's trial timetable, there may well be at least a day, certainly a day that could be removed to the extent your lordship or the judge hearing the case is content to receive written closings. And additionally, both parties' draft timetables proceeded on the basis that Mr. Al-Jabari would be submitting expert evidence on bond valuations and on the Dutch real estate market. It's now the case, as I understand it from my learned friend, that Mr. Al-Jabari will only, subject to permission on an extension of time, be submitting expert evidence on forensic accountancy. So there are 2 expert witnesses that fall out of the picture, as it were. We are also content to reduce our roll opening to perhaps just an hour rather than the 1.5 hours. So where all that comes to is that appreciating, of course, the difficulties associated with a remote hearing and perhaps the greater time that needs to be afforded arising out of that, we would suggest that perhaps a slightly shorter time might be better, and indeed that would, to the extent the court's willing to do so, be much more convenient for our witnesses, etc.
Well, how many, on the basis that we start at 8 a.m. rather than 7 a.m., although there's a possibility, those are London times, there's a possibility we could start at 7, but let's start with the proposition that we start at 8 a.m. in London, which will be 12 noon in Dubai. How many days do you reckon for a remote hearing, bearing in mind the matters you've just outlined to me?
My lord, I would suggest it could probably be done in no more than 7, perhaps at a maximum 8 days. Certainly from our part, we're not proposing very lengthy cross-examination of Mr. Al-Jabari's sole factual witness, which is himself. And the position on experts is still a bit up in the air, but it's only going to be 1 from his part as well.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I'll hear from Mr. Thompson now. Mr. Thompson, what's your estimate for a remote hearing of the number of days?
Oh, well, my lord, I think your estimate's more realistic. If I'm honest, I think Mr. Stuart is right about the issues about experts. Could I make one preliminary point, my lord? I mean, I obviously.
Yes, of course.
We'll deal with the hearing in the order that your lordship thinks fit, but could I invite your lordship to wait to hear the submissions on all the different elements, because it does strike me that some of these points are interconnected. That is to say, whether there is an extension for my client to put in expert evidence will then determine whether there's that expert evidence in, and therefore potentially the length of the trial.
I can cut you short there.
Yeah.
I'm going to, in principle, I'm disposed to grant an extension for the service of the expert evidence. I'm told now it's only forensic accounting.
That's right.
And so, in a sense, you've got that in the bag. We haven't fixed by when you have to produce it, but I think it's best to have an anchor formed by the trial date and the length of the trial, and then work backwards from that.
Understood. So my lord, well, the other point obviously is when we start the trial window, and there's a minor difference on the parties on that.
Yes, but although I'm sorry to cut across you, but whenever we start is not going primarily anyway to affect the number of days. Now, how many days do you say for a remote hearing when the court begins at 12 noon Dubai time?
My lord, I agree with your lordship's initial estimate, 9 to 10 days. There's one point, if I can come back to the start date point. There is one issue which it might change, which is that the public health situation seems to be more optimistic today than it was maybe a month ago or 2 months ago. And there's certainly some who are now suggesting that matters might get back very much to almost normal life by the spring of next year. And so there might well be a difference in what people can do and are willing to do in February from what they might do in April. And I raise this point because my submission in relation to the type of hearing is that because this is a fraud case, and there's no doubt about that, there will be a finding at the end of this trial by a judge that somebody has been lying. In my submission, because of that and the fact that the parties all have different, or many of them have different first languages, in my submission, this would be the sort of trial which really ought to be dealt with in person if that is at all possible. And that might be something which is a lot more realistic in April than it is in February. Now, obviously, I'm not submitting, and I wouldn't want your lordship to imagine that I'm submitting that this matter should be kicked off as far down the road as possible in the sort of classic defendant's argument. But in the circumstances of this case, which doesn't have any super urgency and which has been going on for a while already, I would submit that allowing that additional month or two to see, as we're all now hopeful, whether the public health issues have got considerably better, might then open the window for your lordship or one of your brethren to hear it in person, which would be my preference. But to answer your question straightly, 9 to 10 days if we're doing it remotely. I think your lordship is probably right about doing it in person. I had said 7, but my learned friend is right that there won't be so much time spent with 2 of the experts. I do think even my timetable is tight in the sense that there's not a lot of space for slippage, and experience tells us that generally these witness estimates always slightly overrun. So I think 6 to 7 days if we're doing it in person, 9 to 10 if we're doing it remotely. But I would urge upon your lordship to direct that it's dealt with in person.
Thank you very much. Well, now I'll give a ruling on the mode and length of trial. For the moment, we're going to proceed on the basis that the hearing will be entirely remote. And in my view, it should be set down for 8 days, starting at 12 noon. But if that begins to get a little tight, the court will start earlier, and we'll have another hour, and spread over what might be, say, 5 days. That will make a significant difference. So it should be, the trial will be remote. It will start at 12 noon, and the time estimate is 8 days, but there must be a readiness on both sides for an earlier start if that becomes necessary. Now, there is a middle ground so far as in person is concerned. If the judge is in Dubai, then the case can originate from the DIFC court, and the time for starting might be pushed back a bit. If counsel can't attend, then it's not going to make a great deal of difference. But if counsel attended, as well as the judge being there, but the witnesses gave their evidence remotely, that isn't a bad compromise, it seems to me, because I think it would be a shorter period of time, and the trial could be slightly more efficiently managed if both the judge and counsel are there in Hong Kong. But that's a speculative observation. For the moment, the order is that the trial will be remote, and it will be estimated to last 8 days. Now, so far as when this trial should take place, Mr. Stuart Coates, returning to you, I haven't seen anything about availability of teams of counsel and so on, depending on which month this trial would begin. What I have in mind is a trial starting on the 15th of February. Now, of course, I'll hear submissions about that, but assume for the moment that that is the start date, the 15th of February. How is your team placed for an 8-day hearing, 8-day remote hearing, beginning on the 15th of February?
My Lord, as I understand it, the period, I think beginning the, I think we have the 16th of February, but perhaps the 15th, given that's the start of the week in Dubai, would be convenient to us. And I think I'm right in saying that that would be fine for a period of 8 days, albeit 9 or 10 might be more difficult. So I think the answer is that would be convenient for us.
Well, actually, the 15th is a Monday, not a Sunday. And the week begins on a Sunday, as you know, in Dubai. But anyway, that's
the 15th is a month. So I apologise.
Yeah. Right. So your team could manage an 8-day remote hearing beginning on the 15th of February.
Yes, my Lord, so far as I understand it.
Right. Thank you very much. Mr. Thompson, assume for the moment that we start on the 15th of February, but I'm going to hear your submissions as to whether it should be later. You've got one factual witness, and then it's really the availability of the witness and counsel. Is that a feasible proposition for your side? 8-day remote hearing beginning on the 15th of February.
I hesitate to say this, but it might be a problem for me personally. It looks, I'm just looking at messages on a side communication. I suspect, but I'm just taking instructions electronically, my Lord. I think my instructing solicitor and the client could do it. My instructing solicitor very kindly has said he would like to retain me for the trial, but it's, I'm afraid, half term that week in England, and so I will have responsibilities of my children and family on the week of the 15th. So I'm afraid for me that's booked out as holiday at the moment in my diary, have a commitment. So, and the following week, obviously, will be the first week back from holiday, which I'd be reluctant to do. But obviously, I'm in your lordship's hands. So I suspect I'm the stumbling block for that week, and for which I apologise.
Well, let's have a look. Let's have a look. For the following week, it will begin on the 22nd.
Yes.
You can get a fair amount of preparation for this done in the week beginning the 8th.
My lord, I won't object to starting on the 22nd. I've done it before. It makes for a busy weekend, but it's not impossible.
Right. Now, Mr. Stuart Coates, I would, if we can, like to accommodate Mr. Thompson for the half term. If we can't, we can't. But I would like to do that if possible. So can I recast the question for you? Is it feasible for your side to begin an 8-day remote hearing on the 22nd of February?
My lord, I'm just taking instructions. As I understand it, that should probably be fine, but they're just confirming Michael Black QC's availability for that second week. So certainly the week commencing the 22nd, I think it is, should be fine, but given that there will now be spillover into the following week, we just need to confirm that, if that's all right.
Okay. All right. Well, perhaps before we finish this morning,
can I ask you? Sorry, my lord.
No, go on. Mr.
I was just going to ask, my lord, what days of the week did you have in mind to sit? Obviously, the working week is different in London from Dubai. If we're doing remote class, I expect people to be in different places.
We would sit Monday to Friday, and then resume on the Sunday.
My lord, I'm told that Michael Black's unavailable on the 28th of February, and would have preparatory work for that as well. So that would be difficult from our perspective. I apologise for that.
But so that would be a one day absence. I understand about preparation, but it's a 1 day engagement, as I understand it, for Mr. Black.
So far as I understand it, he's unavailable from the 28th and then through the first week of March.
Right. Well, Mr. Thompson, what if we started on Sunday the 21st?
Of February.
Yeah.
So
that would shave a day off the time that you'd want, but you'd have the previous weekend.
I think I might be scheduled to be flying that day. Just let me check. I haven't got it on that diary. If you just bear with me 1 second, my lord. But I was going to ask an indulgence for your lordship, maybe to have a start date on Tuesday rather than Monday. But I see we're going the other way. But let me check. Sorry, this is a question of looking at different calendars. No, well, I'm sorry. I land in the UK very late on Saturday night, so I'm at Gatwick at 10 p.m. But so I could technically start on Sunday, but it would be be a struggle. But
yes, but you'll be operating out of London on the basis that we're remote.
That's right, my lord.
And as defendant, in a sense, you'll be taking guard for 2 or 3 days with the claimant making the running through the opening and calling their witnesses. So if we started on the 21st and aimed to finish on the following 26, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be 7 days rather than the 8. But we could start at 7 if we needed to.
My lord.
So hang on a minute.
I'm sorry.
At the moment, that's what I'd like to do. Start on the 21st and conclude on the 27th. Yes, Mr. Stuart Coates, what's the problem with that?
I apologise for interrupting. I'm just going to propose that perhaps the dates we suggested in March, in the period between the 7th and the 18th of March, might be more convenient to Mr. Thompson and indeed to everyone.
No, fair enough. Well, give me those dates again in March that you proposed.
So the starting the 7th of March.
On the Sunday.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Well, if we started then, we would aim to finish on the Friday, not the following week. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, with the possibility of earlier starts if we're falling behind. Right. So back to you, Mr. Thompson. What about a start on Sunday the 7th?
Well, that sounds considerably more comfortable, my lord. I was rather alarmed by the idea of 7 days with a 7-day staff immediately after a break. But the 7th of March, I think, would be more comfortable. I'm taking instructions as I speak. I think that's probably going to work. I'm slightly hesitant, my lord, if you don't mind me saying, with the idea of having a full 7 days. I mean, the reality with a trial is that obviously days continue after court quite often, and there's a lot to do, and occasionally tasks mount up. And I do find with a multi-day trial that is running for more than 4 or 5 days, you sometimes need a break to take stock of what you have to cover.
But you see, the work gets done in the morning.
Well, I accept that, my lord. I mean, I do understand that. I do understand that, but
I got that round the right way. But you see, we'll only be sitting on a remote. We'll only be sitting about 4.5 hours a day if we start at 8. And so on London time, on the basis of London time, we should be finished in the early afternoon.
Yes. No. I take the point, my lord. These things always take longer than one imagines, but I do take your point. I mean, to answer your first question first, the 7th of March as a period, I'm just receiving instructions, I think seems to work for us going forward for a week or even 2 calendar weeks, if that's how we're going to, depending on how you're going to split it. So that schedule seems fine. Could I suggest, given what your lordship has said today and directed in terms of a remote hearing, it did strike me when I was taking a note of what you're saying that you were suggesting this was an order, but which might be reviewed. I mean, it might be wise if I can suggest this for your lordship, certainly if you're going to be the trial judge, to revisit this question maybe first thing in the new year, to take stock of where we are on the evidence and the health situation, and revisit these questions. I mean, maybe what we could do is to put the matter in the diary. I'm receiving messages from my instructing solicitor as I speak to you, and he is suggesting that certainly his preference as a professional would that he and I would be in the same location. He's based in Dubai, I'm based in London, so one or other of us would probably travel. As for the client, as you are aware, my client is in Abu Dhabi. I think one of my friend's clients based in Europe. So there might be some travel by some people, regardless of whether it's remote or in person. And I wonder if these questions might be revisited so that we put down a provisional, and I don't mean that to mean vague or only penciled in, but certainly something that to be reviewed by your lordship, say the first working week of January or sometime like that.
Well, I think what we're going to do is this. I'm going to make it a fixture beginning on the 7th, and concluding on the 12th of March. There will have to be a major and significant change of circumstance before this will be changed. My own sense is, having done now nearly getting on for 10 months of remote hearings, both in arbitrations and in Dubai and the Cayman Islands, that it doesn't pay to be optimistic about how things are going to go with the prevalence of COVID. But I am prepared to look again, but only on the basis that there has been a significant and major change in circumstance. And of course, the longer we go on towards the 7th of March, the less likely a change is going to involve an alteration of these arrangements. So that's the trial date, starting on the 7th, ending on the 12th, beginning at 8 p.m., but adjusting to 8 a.m. London time, and adjusting to 7 a.m. London time if necessary. Now, your expert evidence, Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Given that trial date, when can we have your expert report? Bearing in mind they're going to have to be Zoom meetings between the experts and the like, getting everything all done and dusted for the trial beginning on the 7th of March.
Yes, well, my lord, looking at it from the other end of the timetable, there has been, as you've seen from Mr. Pitt's witness statement, significant difficulties taking instructions. The difficulty with this particular client, if I can express it like this, is that he's certainly much more comfortable dealing with people in person, if only because one can then show him physical documents in front of him and explain the significance of those to him. I think, looking at it from the opposite end of the timetable from your lordship's question, it would be difficult to identify, instruct and produce an expert report much before Christmas, and we've allowed ourselves 1 month exactly to do that. I would be relatively confident that, as it is only then going to be one expert discipline in which the experts do need to meet and produce the usual memoranda, that could be done without too much difficulty in the course of January, with a view to everything being finalised by the end of January, and the council would have a full calendar month to prepare for that trial if that were needed. So in my submission, if you do order the extension that we're seeking to the 24th of December, and then have the directions follow in the usual way for two or 3 weeks after that to allow for any break over the change of year, that would still allow us to be ready for the 7th of March.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Stuart Coates, any adverse views so far as an extension to the 24th of December is concerned?
My lord, our concern with taking it right to the start of the holiday period in Europe is that there is provision in the order dealing with expert evidence, so the order of 21 October, for the possibility of expert evidence in reply by my client. And then there has to be, as Mr. Thompson noted, a meeting of the experts and thereafter a joint statement. So we do suggest that it would be more comfortable to have that last week of the prior to Christmas, in which the parties can decide on whether or not there's going to be evidence in reply and make sure that diaries for the experts are appropriately booked. So we'd ask for a week earlier than the 24th.
So that will be the 17th?
Yes, my lord.
Let me just have a look at the diary. Wait a moment. What day of the week is the 17th?
It's a Thursday. It's 3 weeks on Thursday, my lord.
All right. Well, Mr. Thompson, I think I'll say the 18th of December. You produce your forensic accountancy report on by close of business on the 18th of December.
My lord.
Right. Now, the trial's going to be beginning on the 7th of March. I think we need a day by when witness statements must have been exchanged prior to the 7th of March. I would have thought 14 clear days. Is that sufficient?
Does your lordship mean skeleton arguments or?
Skeleton arguments. Well, actually, that's a good point. I was actually thinking that we need to deal with skeleton arguments.
Yeah.
And we also need to, there's no date obviously set for the exchange of witness statements as I understand it, because that depends on when the trial's going to be fixed. So let's stay at the moment with witness statements. There's one witness statement of fact that's going to come from the third defendant. And I would imagine that the claimants, the witnesses, if states, you must be well on the way to witness statements with your witnesses.
Sorry, my lord, I think maybe because you haven't got the bundle, you're not aware of this, but all the witness statements have been exchanged already.
Oh, have they? Including
yes, it's all done. Yes, they were all exchanged in August.
No, I'm sorry about that.
No, I mean, the matter's ready. We should have told you at the beginning of the hearing, but everything is ready to go apart from this final expert report.
Okay, okay, so it's just skeleton argument.
My lord, I think so. And bundles and so on.
Could I, before we move on to timings for skeletons, put in a plea for starting the trial on the 8th of March instead? I apologise. It's just I'm instructed that would give Mr. Black slightly more time after his previous matter finishes on the 6th. If it's possible to start on the 8th or the 9th, we'd appreciate that greatly.
No, I can't allow that, I'm afraid. We've gone backwards and forwards, and as I say, you're not making the running in the first 2 or 3 days of the trial. And true, there'll be some cross-examination to be embarked upon. So I'm not going to exceed to that. We stay beginning on the 7th.
Thank you, my lord.
And I think so far as skeleton arguments are concerned, but what do we want? 2 weeks, 10 days? One or other of those, Mr. Stuart Coates?
Perhaps 10 days before?
10 days? Mr. Thompson?
My lord, I'm content with that. I think the only question mark then would be to ensure that all the bundles were ready before. It's always difficult to prepare these skeleton arguments if bundles are still in the process of being prepared. So as long as there's an adequate time prior to that.
Oh, skeleton arguments don't have to be bundled in the same bundle as the witness statement.
Well, that's not my problem, my lord. I mean, the difficulty is trying to prepare a skeleton argument when the documents are still scattered amongst various places. It's a lot easier when one has the bundles that are then going to be used for trial, for marking or what have you. But I mean, my lord, if you say, can I suggest, if we're starting on the 7th of March, if your lordship directs skeleton arguments by the 26th of February, which is the Friday, we could have the bundles ready the Friday before that. So that gives the council a week to prepare skeleton arguments. You'll have it on the Friday, and then we start the following Sunday.
Okay. What do you say to that, Mr. Stuart Coates?
We're content with that. Thank you, my lord.
All right. Great. Well, that's done. Is there any other business?
Thanks, Sam Lord. Just in terms of, I hear what your lordship says about coming back if circumstances change. I don't know whether, if it's going to be your lordship, whether you could give us an indication, which obviously we won't abuse, but an indication as to whether you do have any availability in, say, the week of the 4th or the 11th of January, and we'll use that on a liberty to apply, but only obviously if circumstances have changed.
Well, this would be a relatively short hearing.
Yes.
Event cropped up, so I don't think.
Yes.
I don't think it's necessary to fix a particular date. It would be extraordinary if anything were to happen by
yes.
early January. My liberty to apply is that either side, but only on the basis of a significant and major change in circumstance, may apply to restore the PTR for a 2-hour hearing to consider amending the trial arrangements.
I'm grateful.
Now, would the two of you or your juniors please draw up the order that results from this?
Yes.
Get it to the registry, and they'll send me the order.
My lord, could we just on the date for the skeleton? Could we suggest the 25th of February, because that's a working day in Dubai. The 26th is a non-working day.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
25th.
I'm grateful.
Well, that concludes matters. Thank you both very much for your help.
I'm grateful.
Thank you, my lord.
Thank you. Bye.
Alia, you can close these proceedings, and I'm leaving the call. Thank you, Alia, for your help. Goodbye.
Thank you, Richard. Goodbye.